Yes. How's it going? I see some familiar faces here. Good evening. My name is Kofi Finn. And as the introduction said, I'm managing director of a company called Petra Trust. Petra Trust is a relatively new company. It was founded in 2011. So by Ghanaian standards, it's fairly young. And it was founded for the specific purpose of managing pensions, private pensions in Ghana. Just to give you some background and some history, in 2008, Parliament passed an act that mandated the privatization of a portion of Ghana's pensions. The implementation for that started in 2010, when the National Pensions Regulatory Authority started the work that would allow for that to happen. In 2012, some companies were licensed to be trustees or managers for these pensions, and these companies started accepting funds later on in 2012. Our estimates tell us that today there's probably about 1 billion Ghana cedis of assets in the private pension funds for the mandatory part, and probably about a similar amount of money in voluntary pension schemes that are also under the Act. And in addition to that, all contributions that were made from January 2010 to basically the end of 2012 as still with the government of Ghana, they will eventually be transferred to private trustees, and the amount is about similar, also about 1 billion Ghana cedis. So all in all, in private managers' hands today, there's about 3 billion Ghana cedis. That amount used to be a big number in dollars. Slowly, it's falling, but it won't keep falling forever. But if you think about it, SNIT has been around for a lot longer. It doesn't have much more than that. You know, I think SNIT is around 4.5 billion, 5 billion. So it's a pretty amazing number for a relatively short period of time. It's 3.5 years, right? And all of this money is available for these private institutions to put to work in this country. They are all competitive. They are all looking to provide the greatest return because with the 25 trustees, right? So it's a great opportunity for this country. And if done well, we'll get to a point where we can actually finance our own things. Okay. But how did Petra Trust start and how did we get where we are? I think the title said that it says something about building a global world-class brand. That's a lot more appropriate. I read global and I said, this company is only focused in Ghana right now. So the founders have global aspirations, and we think of ourselves as a global company. But so far, we're only in Ghana, right? But if the title says, how do you build a world-class company, then I think it's that, because that is how we see ourselves. Okay, we see ourselves as a world-class company. How did we do it? I'll try to be as practical as possible in this talk. I'll speak using personal examples, and where I can, I'll try to generalize them so that for each of you, you can think about how it applies to your own thinking about what you're doing. I'm assuming that all of you are here thinking about starting some business or in the middle of building a business, or after having built one or two, you're probably on another opportunity. So we're going to speak from the perspective of entrepreneurs. As instructed, maybe we'll leave the questions for after the talk is done. I'll speak for about 30 minutes on Petra Trust specifically. Petra Trust was founded because change happened. And that change happened when the law, the 2008 law was passed. Okay? So in terms of opportunities and ways to look at them, for us, we think that one of the greatest ways that opportunities come about is when the government does something. Okay? There didn't exist a private pensions business or sector. One day somebody signed a piece of paper and that sector existed. There was nobody in it. It was completely empty, greenfield. And it created an opportunity for a number of individuals, myself, Chris Hammond, who's my partner, who had the requisite skills to recognize that opportunity and say, we're going to take advantage of it, we're going to jump into it, we're going to leave whatever we're doing and kind of come and apply ourselves to it. So change happens, that's the first thing. Let's keep our eyes open for change. Okay? Whenever something changes, it presents an opportunity for people who are prepared, ready, and can take the risk to do so. Okay? We were prepared. We were ready. We had just both been fired from our jobs. So, there was nothing else taking up our time, you know. And to a certain extent, we could afford it. Okay. By the time I started earning a salary at Petra, I had run through all of my savings, and you know, my wife had been taking care of the household for some amount of time through her job. But it was a good thing that we had something banked, something saved over years of working that we would draw on. God being so good, as that thing started getting to the bottom, the salary started coming. So, you know, timing was perfect, but we could afford to do that. So that's one of the things that you need to think about is, you know, you could be exactly in the right place. There was a third person we were talking to when it came to Petra Trust. We had asked him to join the effort, but he did not think that he could afford. He was working, we had been signed. He did not think that he could afford to leave his job to join in this effort. And 3 years later, he's looking at it saying, you know, I should have done it. But in hindsight is 2020, right? It was a risk that we took. Okay. The other thing that we need to think about when it comes to these things is there's opportunity where there's dysfunction. Okay? So today we're all complaining in Ghana about the fact that nothing works and everything takes a long time and people don't do what they're supposed to do, things cost too much. Every single complaint that you have is an opportunity as far as we're concerned. Okay? When we came into the market, we recognized that a lot of people who had had their money managed in provident funds, for example, had complaints about their providers. These same complaints that I just mentioned, the fees are too high, we don't get statements, we don't like the returns, they don't treat us the way we're supposed to, etc., etc., etc. That for us presented opportunity. There was dysfunction, and we had the skills and the strength to come in and insist that there was a higher standard to the way things were going to be done, and that was how we're going to get an edge. Because our competition, and our biggest competitor is a company called Enterprise. How many of you know Enterprise? Raise your hands. Somebody know Enterprise Insurance. How many of you know Vanguard Assurance? Let me see by a show of hands. How many of you know Glyco? How many of you know Metropolitan? How many of you knew Petra before this conversation? Okay, so the servlet guys are some of our collaborators, right? You guys, none of you know Petra. I think I've heard about it. You have heard about Petra? Good. One. These are competitors. They've been in the game for a very long time, right? How can a company like ours, founded 3 years ago, that nobody knows, end up being today, as from our count, the number one pension trustee when you count it from assets under management, and the number 2 when it comes to the individual number of clients? Because we were able to come in and convince people that we're going to provide something better. And today, the feedback that we're getting from our clients and the people who work for them is that yes, we are providing something better. Okay? So there was dysfunction, and we looked at it and we're going to be able to make a change here, we're going to do it better. And by delivering on that, we've been able to build a company that we consider world class. It was very important that we had the skill sets that was required for this business. Yes, the law was passed. A lot of people saw that the law had been passed. A lot of people saw it. It was in the newspapers. We were sitting in Lagos when we read the newspaper and they said pension law passed, privatization. This is something. This is what we're being led to. This is what it feels as if we're called to come back to Africa. Yeah, we missed the countries and went to Lagos. But now this is what's bringing us back together. But we knew that we could do it because both of us had been working in finance, in asset management, in risk management, investment banking for over a decade. We knew our stuff. And because of that, we were prepared for the opportunity, not only in identifying it, because a lot of the companies that I mentioned, the Glyco came to the game so late that it was amazing to us why they did not see what we saw. We saw it because we had been prepared for it, we were trained for it. We could tell because we knew the business that this is something that was going to grow, it was going to be big. And even if you got a small piece of it, you would do well. And if you provided the services that were required, you would do very well. We had been prepared, we were trained, we knew asset management, we knew finance, we knew pensions. It's very important. We were playing to our sweet spot. What do you think about that? You don't just get up and say, I'm going into real estate because you've heard that there's a piece of land somewhere and you're going to give it a try. You have to apply yourself to know everything that needs to be known about real estate. It's going to require your income and your time and your effort. But if you want to improve and increase the chance of your success, that is what you have to do. Most companies in Ghana, in my opinion, fail because people approach it in a part-time, lackadaisical manner. I'm doing my job and I've heard that I can do. We can sell cloth. Let me join my friends who import this cloth, let me see. The Chinese people are importing from are going to be running rings around you. When you get to the harbor, Charlie, you're going to have your issues. The trucks that you're going to use to move the cloth from the harbor to the store, the people who won't pay. I mean, you approach it like a hobby, it's going to treat you like a hobby. You have to know the area that you're focused on. You have to spend the time. It's possible to do it when you're working somewhere. It's very possible. It doesn't have to be where you're doing your main job, but you can't enter it lackadaisically. You have to know. Ideally, you have to know that space better than anybody else. We pride ourselves in that. We're very competitive, Petra Trust. Every company that we lose hurts. It's painful. We'll go back and look and say, what did we get wrong? What did we miss? Who were we talking to? Was it a decision maker? How did we not know that it wasn't a decision maker? Why is it that we didn't get to see the opportunity early enough? Why is it that somebody has a better relationship in that company than we do? Why was our marketing presentation 20 pages long instead of 15? Because in this case, they didn't want a long presentation. Why didn't we know that? We learn as we go along. We apply ourselves to using our craft, learning about what we're doing. We don't want to be the first mover. We don't have to be the first mover unless it provides us an advantage. And if a competitor moves, we're behind them. And we have to do better than them all the time. And the only way we can do that is if we know our space cold. We know it better than anybody else. How did we express that? So we know finance, we've heard about the law. We're sitting in Lagos. Nobody has access to an electronic copy of the Pensions Act. So my partner, Chris Hammond, gets a hard copy, finds an optical character recognition machine, and over a period of about 3 months, scans, recognizes, corrects, so that every person in the team can have a soft copy. And he's doing this while he's CFO of Aero Contractors, which is an airline in Nigeria, right? So we were focused, we knew our stuff, and we worked hard. We worked hard. I think to start a business, those are the kinds of things that you should consider. Okay? If you want it to be world class, I think these are necessary preconditions. The opportunity has to be there, and typically it comes out of either government change, sort of change, and you have to be able to address some dysfunction or something that's not working in the system. So these are the conditions that create the opportunity for you. You need to know the space. If you don't know it, apply yourself to it and get to know it. Ideally, get to know it better than anybody else. Be able to have the luxury of doing this. If you're going to do it while you're working, fine. Typically, it will take longer, but you're managing your risk. If you want to do like the way we did, that's also fine, but you need to be able to hang in there a little bit, especially in this part of the world. You need to be able to stay in for the long haul, and then you need to work very, very hard. Okay? For every single one of you, I think you're all very, very arrogant. Very arrogant people to even think that you can start a business. Okay? It takes a certain level of arrogance to have that. But it's good arrogance. It means you believe in yourself. That's important. If you don't believe in yourself, don't try. It will test you. The opportunity, if you're starting a business, will test you. There's a reason why nobody has done it. We've learned that in Ghana. If you see anything that's not working well, there's a reason. It's calculated and it's exact. It's not by chance. Any road that's not hard, there's a reason. It just didn't happen that it didn't happen that the government is not doing its job. It just doesn't happen. It's there for a reason. And when you look at it and you look at it for a certain number of levels, you see that there's somebody in the back who is benefiting from that dysfunction. So you're coming up against entrenched interests. Are we good? Mm-hmm. So this is the Petra Trust example. One thing I want to add also is why we chose to be trustees. So if you look at the Pension Act has been passed. It creates an opportunity for these entities called trustees, custodians, and fund managers. All three entities are required in any pension scheme. We're trustees, but we need to appoint fund managers, and we need to have a custodian in the scheme. Why did we choose to be trustees? Particularly if you think about the fact that I had spent my whole career being a fund manager, right? So in terms of the directness of the opportunity, where I could add immediate value, should have been in the fund management space, but we chose to be trustees. Why? We spent a lot of time thinking about the pension space. We studied other jurisdictions. We looked at how they had evolved after privatization. Nigeria was a good example, but Kenya has gone through it, Chile has gone through it, Australia has done it. Some of them have multiple decades of experience. We looked at our law, and we realized that, you know what, in this value chain, the person who has the control of everything is the trustee. Trustee appoints the fund manager. Trustee appoints the custodian. 2, the trustee has a relationship with the client. If the trustee does his job well, the client will not even know who the fund managers are. They are invisible, which means that they are completely interchangeable, right? If I change my fund manager, I might need to inform the trustee. My client sort of doesn't even care. What he cares about is who his trustee is and whether the trustee is doing the right job. So in terms of visibility, in terms of access to the client and to the decision makers, it's the trustee. Also, the trustee appoints a number of different fund managers. You will all share in whatever the fund manager's fee is, but the trustee is there by himself. He is the only one enjoying the trustee fee. So in terms of the ability to generate returns in pensions, it was the trustee. The trustee's job is harder, but we look at it and say, you know what, that's still an opportunity for us because it is hard and because we believe that we can do it. It will be hard for our competition to keep up with us. In fact, we think it will be harder for our competition to keep up with us than it would be if we're in fund management. The fund managers, today it's a simpler job and the ability to differentiate yourself is not as high. So for you guys coming in who don't have a track record, probably, again, the trustee space. We've identified that over time, fund managers will begin to have power in the value chain for pensions, over time. But our analysis showed us that it will take probably 10 years. In that period, a lot changes. The trustees would have captured a lot of the value. And by that time, maybe we'll become a fund manager. But our analysis said, that's further out. So again, it's the trustee. And then the final reason why we chose the trustee space was because we thought that we had the opportunity to create how the space was looked at by the market. Insurance companies who are major competitors have been around for a long time, but they've been doing insurance. They haven't been trustees. Fund managers have been doing fund management. What do you think would happen if I show up and I say I'm Petra Fund Managers and I go to a company that has a relationship with Data Bank already? Will they switch and try me? And Data Bank has been providing a service to them for 15 years? Or EDC or any of these other guys? No. It would be very hard. Very hard. So everything pointed towards us being trustees. I'll tell you, when I went back to the US and I spoke to my former colleagues at the fund management, asset management firm that I worked at, they laughed because in the developed market, the trustees, it's the most boring part. The trustee does the fund administration, it's operational, it's a lot of work, it's hard, and you don't get paid a lot. It's not sexy. Fund management is you're picking stocks, you're buying bonds. You hear about these hedge fund guys all the time. That's why it's exciting. Like, why are you doing this? You're picking the good part. But our analysis said it's the trustee. We could basically tell the world what the trustee was supposed to look like. Okay? We typically tell the truth. So whatever we be saying wouldn't be lying. But what a trustee was supposed to look like would be what we look like. So we could craft our space. We had the opportunity to create it and create it in a way that benefited us. We did an analysis in the beginning that said, okay, we don't have any brand recognition. So what we need to work on is making sure that the market understands how hard this business is and what it takes. And if we can make what it takes be what we have, then we have a chance. So in terms of the business that we built, where we had the most success is where we had an opportunity to explain to a company what pensions are, what the trustee does, and what we can provide. When we have that opportunity, we win. Where somebody's just making a decision, Charlie, I need to do this, do you know any names? Of course. Nobody will mention that. So the guy has to decide, he's like, okay, enterprise versus Vanguard, those one, Charlie, I'll split it between those two guys, so I'll pick one. But where we got the chance to go in and say, do you know what a trustee does? Do you know what risks you face? Do you know what you're trying to achieve? This is what it looks like. Oh, okay. Well, what do you guys have? Well, we've got A, B, and C. And they listen to the insurance guys. The insurance guys can't talk about it because all they're coming with is their name and their history and their relationships. We just won a lot in that space. So one of the things that we did, to summarize that little section, one of the things that we did was we identified the area that was the sweet spot, both from a value perspective and in terms of our ability to have an advantage. And we picked it. And that's the only thing we do. We put all our eggs in that one basket. And we hit that thing till it was dead. Okay? You should be ready to adjust. You should be ready to be flexible. Because no matter how much you plan, no matter how accurate you're forecasting, no matter how well you think you will know the future, the outcome will be completely different from what you envisage. I can promise you that. Part of it has to do with the Ghanaian factor. So, Pension Act is passed in 2008. NPRA starts implementation January 2010. All indications are that by September 2010, everything will be up and going. Well, scrambling, people are raising money, start December 2010. December 2011. Nothing. Some activity, but any forecast that we have put together, this thing just completely blew it. 2012. Okay. And around March, April, we got licensed. End of the year, we could start taking contribution. 2 years. 2 years later than anything that we could have forecast. Following that, we said, okay, this billion cedis that we're saying is with the government and will be transferred. We did our forecast. We said, well, in 6 months, the money will be transferred to us. We'll earn revenue from that. So that was 2012. 2013 passed. And 2014. We're still expecting the money. Every time our investors call us, oh, it's coming in 6 months. Every time it's in 6 months. Right now it's in 6 months. Right? We haven't received it. So what do? You've got to adjust. You've got to make do. One thing that we do as a company is if we make a forecast, we have a budget. It doesn't matter what changes. The budget has to be met or beaten. Right? So that money hasn't been transferred, but because of that, we have to go out there and be more aggressive in winning business. We will meet that budget. But you have to be flexible. You have to be very, very flexible. And for us, that's one of the things that we always keep in mind. That we can't tell the future. We're building a business based on a plan, but we're ready to change the plan at any time. When we started, we say, you know what, we are going to target the large companies will go to the insurance companies. That was our thought, right? So we'll target the smaller companies and we'll bring them all in because nobody will focus on them, and we'll build our reputation through that. That didn't happen. We've discovered this thing I said about the sale being complicated and where we have a chance to engage and to describe it. We discovered it, but that was our real advantage. That we had to focus on the big guys. Because if ECG is our client, ECG is the biggest pension player in Ghana. Okay? They have the biggest tier 2 portfolio. It took us maybe 2 months to sell to ECG. 2 months of talking, meeting, presenting. We start at the MD. MD says, talk to this guy, talk to him, you're making friends with him. You find a way to get to the board. Finance director. Eventually the head of procurement. I was like, oh yeah, I'll help you guys. Let me talk to this guy, let me talk to this guy, let me talk to this guy. We get to the trust board. There are 9 people there. You know 2 of them. You don't know the other guys. End of that meeting, you're calling. Let's talk. 2 months ago. It's about the same amount of time that it takes us to sign up a company like Petra. The pension contribution is probably it's less than 1,000. To sign up a company like Easy Travel and Tours, maybe pension contributions like 30 cedis. 2 months. So if some companies pay 2 million cedis a month, out of which I earn a fee of 1% annualized, that's my 1% of that asset, and another company is paying 20 cedis, and I spent 2 months focusing on challenge. So our strategy just had to change. We were more successful there, and it took the same amount of time. We just had to go towards the larger companies, right? And that's the reason why we're not the number 1 company in terms of the number of clients. Because we have larger companies than the smaller ones, but we figured out that, that had to be the way, otherwise we just weren't going to win. Okay? So, we've talked about how you think about when you're starting, the kinds of things that you think about, where you focus, sweet spots, strengths, staying power, all of that good stuff. It's very general. So now let's go into the company itself. We say we're a world-class company. What are the things that make us a world-class company? We spoke about being flexible, and that flexibility is not just in the way we win business, but it's in the way we organize ourselves. Today I can tell you that probably every 6 months, Petra changes its structure. Okay, that's been the history. I hope that it's less in the future, but as we've grown, it has been required. There's had to be reorganizations because we're changing and the market is also changing. When we got to a number 25 staff, we realized that the informality of the company no longer worked. Okay?
When we were 6, everybody could have access to Chris and myself. We all sat in the same place, we all talked. We had conversations all the time. People learned from us. They felt comfortable. We got to 15, 16, now we're like 2 layers. The guys who were in the second layer would see us once every couple of days. They were intimidated in talking to us because they hadn't had the experience. They didn't know that we're just normal people. When we got to 25, we were forget it, right? So all of a sudden, we've tried to build a culture of it's a meritocracy where everybody can contribute and everybody does well. If you do well, you get promoted and all this kind of stuff. But guys are afraid to talk to you. Guys are afraid to share, right? All of a sudden, you couldn't just assume that because people were in the company, you would have conversations with them, or you know them, or they understand the culture. You couldn't just assume that because everybody knows that, if you talk to Kofi and say you won't leave, he might say, wait a week, but you'll get it. You're thinking they're saying, when is leave? How much leave do I have? Payroll. But actually, sometimes if we're doing it, don't worry, But the guys there don't understand it now. If it's not there by the 28th, they make plans. So by 25, when we got to number 25, we realized, oh my goodness, company has changed. Okay? Opportunity for us to change. We now have HR, we now have IT, we now have finance. We still do the marketing, but we'll have marketing at some point, right? We had to organize and restructure. Today, I met with my sales team. I hadn't met with them for 3 months. Based on that meeting, I have a meeting, based on today's meeting, I have a meeting on my calendar to meet with them every 2 weeks. Because we need to talk. And it's not happening in an ad hoc manner anymore. Okay? So you have to be flexible if you want to be able to build a world-class business. It's going to go through stages. It's like marriage. You and your wife are growing, and you're growing differently. You have to make sure that the person you married 5 years ago is not the person you're married to today. They've changed. And so have you. How do you make sure that you guys remain in sync, connected, that you're making adjustments for all the changes that are happening in both of you? That's the same thing in the company. As the company is changing, going through different phases, and you have to adjust. We're going to go into a retail push now. What that meant was that we had to change the way the company looked completely. Customer service had been just a small unit that didn't talk a lot to customers, and now it's going to have to be talking to hundreds of thousands of people and making sure that those hundreds of thousands of people are properly served. So now it becomes a different institution in the company. It was under client services because most of our customers came from our clients who are the institutions that we manage for, but it's going to have to move. It will be something completely different. It's going to become more operational in the way it works because you have to respond to somebody at a certain time and all of this kind of stuff, right? Our client services unit has had to become very operational as well. The relationship managers sat there, but they've had to move and be in a different group, that's relationship management. And their only job is not to deal with the client's operational issues, but to be sitting in front of the client saying, how are you doing? What do you need? Is everything going okay? What else can we do for you? Business development, all of a sudden, is now having to, before it was how many companies could you bring in so that we can manage their pension schemes. Now it's how can you access a company so that you can talk to the individuals that work for the company. Okay? Because now we're selling to individuals. The business has changed. You have to be flexible. Okay? And then the last one, which I think is the secret sauce. The thing that I think has been most important in terms of our company being, in our opinion, world class is governance. Everything else we think other companies have, but governance is the thing I think that has given us a very unique edge. Companies fail in Ghana. A lot of the time, the guy who started the company doesn't make a distinction, for example, between his own cash and the company cash. Right? Everybody sitting on the board is a brother, cousin, sister. They can't hold you accountable. They can't tell you where you're going wrong. We had the benefit of having worked in a bank in Nigeria that failed, was taken over by the government. Part of why we were sacked, but we weren't responsible for the failure. we happened to be there, and they said they're expensive Ghanaians, so we've got to go. But we saw what bad governance does. We had always worked in institutions that had good governance, and we had taken it for granted. They had high ethical standards, very high ethical standards, they had good governance, everything was done right and we're taking it for granted. And then we went to Nigeria and we worked with a company that was a complete mess and we saw the difference. And so for us, there was no question that governance and ethics had to be very, very important in the way we do business. I can proudly tell you today that we haven't paid one bribe since we started this business to win any client. We've lost business, we've walked away from business that required that. One of our larger clients today, we walked away from them and 3 months later they came back and they said, we will still give you the business. Okay? It can be done. The first thing that we did in the governance perspective was we put together a board and we hired an independent chairman. This guy does not own shares in the company. He's a very well respected business person in Ghana. He looked at us, we spoke to him, spent some time convincing him, said, I'm happy with what you guys are doing, I like it, I'll work with you guys. Okay? We have regular board meetings. Our accounts go to an auditor and are vetted. Wherever there are issues, they get resolved, they get fixed. We have contracts with the company, employment contracts. We pay salaries. We don't take money from anything. I was traveling last week to South Africa. I had to sign a voucher. This week I needed some money. I went to finance. They gave me a salary advance. And they said, over what period of time do you want to pay it back? And I did that, I signed, and somebody approved. We started a company. Right? We're negotiating our salaries with the board. There is a compensation committee that looks at it and says, yeah, we think you're getting paid at the right level, this is too high or this is too low. We argue, but what they say goes. When we were discussing our compensation, they kicked us out of the boardroom. And they sat and they discussed. When we came and they said, this is how much we are going to pay you to do the work that you're doing for your company. When I'm traveling, I write and I ask permission from the board. And they ask me, who's covering for you? It sounds trivial. But in addition to everything else, knowing the space and working hard and taking advantage of the opportunity, doing the right analysis about the space, picking the right place, in addition to all of those things, working hard, restructuring, being flexible, hiring the right people, and all of this stuff. Governance and ethics, I think, is what will make your business world class. It's what's going to determine whether you're going to be around for 3 years or whether you're going to be around 20 years down the line. It's what's going to determine that. We have an employee share ownership program. The best people in the company will own shares in the company. And the better they do, the more they own. The founders will be diluted. The people who work there will own more over time. At some point in time, somebody will come who's better than Chris and better than myself at managing the company, and we will bow and we will take our leave. We won't do it quietly and it will not be easy. But we have put the structures in the place that allow that to happen, that compel them to happen, that ensures that they happen. A part of that comes from the fact that we, because we're in financing, we're in the market. Just a sidetrack for you to understand, one of the hardest things for somebody who's a trader is to take a loss. And the way you do it, the way you take a good loss is to make sure that before you get into the trade, you know the things around you that will point to the fact that it's time to take a loss. And there are people around you who will say, hey, all the signals are here that this is not working. Cut it. Okay? You learn how to burn bridges that will ensure that you don't make the wrong decision. If we're having a hard time with a client, especially when it comes to something ethical, Chris, Helena, who's the third executive, and myself will sit down and somebody puts on the table. All three of us are Christians. And so we look at it from a very Christian perspective, but that's Petra. Okay? If you're not a Christian, you don't have to. But the question will be asked, is this ethical? Is this moral? Is this in line with what we believe? At different points in time of the three, one of us has faulted. At different points in time, this business is big. The thing they're looking for is not a lot, you know. And invariably, somebody will say, no. You've gotten your strength by having that support structure. Okay? So as you're building your business, as you're thinking about entrepreneurship, I don't care how small, I don't care. I don't care if it's a simple one-man shop. I don't care if it's a big business. First thing, for example, get an auditor. If you don't think it's necessary for you to have a board, have somebody who do the finances. Okay? Open a bank account for the company, separate from yours. Find a way to ensure that you just don't go in and take money out. Because the times will come where you want to. The pressures will be there. Draw the lines that prevent you from making the wrong decisions, from doing things that are not in line with your morality or with ethics. And that ensure that you do the right thing all the time. And if you do those things, in addition to everything else, I can say with a lot of confidence, particularly in Ghana, where the bar is so low, and most of our competitors don't do that you will do well. You will be able to build a business that will grow and that can be considered world class. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that was going to be Q&A. Yes. I'm ready. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. When you were talking, you mentioned, you used a particular statement, work hard. How do you define it? Staying longer hours at the workplace? I just want you to explain.
Okay. I don't think there are too many different definitions of working hard. Yeah? I think definitely you can be more effective by planning, by being able to prioritize, because you can't do everything. Okay? Your time, there'll be 50 things to do in a day, and you can only do 10. Focusing on the right 10, being able to identify and focus on the right 10 is very important. Being able to plan is very important. But those are the kinds of things that SEVLEG will help you with. Okay? How to plan, how to prioritize, how to business plan, and all of these kinds of things. These are things, skills that you can learn. But there's nothing that beats applying yourself, even when you think you've given it all. There's nothing. There's nothing. You will talk to anybody who's done well, and they'll tell you that when they went to secondary school, there was somebody who was sharper than them. They'll tell you. But the people who work hardest, when I look at my classmates, they're the ones who are further ahead. Put in the time and the effort, in addition to everything else that you will be taught. It's competitive. The world is very competitive. If we see a competition is spending 12 hours in the office, we'll do 50. We'll do it. That's our nature. But that extra effort allows you to do more, be in front of people, and to do a broader range of things. If you look at sometimes the way we sell, there's so many questions that need to be answered that are not tangible. The ACG example that I gave. It's going to take time to make sure that you get appointments with them, meet all the 9 decision makers on the board. Somebody will have the time to do 4. But if it's Saturday, Sunday, we need to meet, that's what will give us that edge. So hard work is very, very required. It's required. You should be ready to do it. we made sure that we don't live at the expense of more important things like family. That's why I have this laptop. It's with me at home. I will work. I'll hang out with it. I'll talk to the kids. Any chance, I want it. Yes?
Before the opportunity presented itself, have you ever thought of doing something like this, or is the opportunity that led you to think in this direction?
This specifically, no. We are not thought about doing something specific like this. There was an opportunity that brought us to Ghana at the time, and that brought us into pensions at the time. When I finished business school, I looked at coming back to Africa. But we looked at it from the perspective of starting a hedge fund that would invest Pan-African. That didn't look feasible at that point in time. I looked at asset management. There were no real asset management jobs. So in taking a job at Wellington in the US, I had resigned myself to being in the US for the rest of my career because I thought that there was nothing to find here. I always had that desire. Okay? And then after about 5 years at Wellington, both my wife and I were actually, look, we think we're being led to go back. So we look at Ghana. Got a great job opportunity in Ghana in asset management. Great on the surface, but it just didn't feel right. Great job opportunities in South Africa. We wanted to be on the continent. Ended up in Lagos, our last choice. God said, go. He said, why? We had gone to Lagos on our first trip in 2006. And as we left the airport, my wife and I looked at each other and said, Charlie, this is the last time we're coming. We're not coming here again. 2 years later, we were in Lagos. We were living there. And the next 2 years after that were some of the best 2 years, like the best times of our life. We loved Lagos. Had a wonderful time there. And it prepared us for Africa. We were soft Ghanaian, and so we ascribe a lot of that to, like I said, we're a Christian, so we ascribe a lot of that to other things. But it was not, the plan was not pensions. It was just there. Like 2 days after Chris and I had opened the newspaper, pensions privatized. I called him, I called a couple of other guys, we meet in our living room, we talk about it, we're like, okay, we'll start investigating. Chris starts scanning and all of this kind of stuff. We're doing the research, and then we decided we're going to commit our lives to because we think that's what we're being asked to do. And, since 2010, 4 years later, this is where we are. It's been a really good ride. We've had a wonderful time.
Okay, so when you...
Oh, we'll do the hedge fund.
So when you were starting, did you ever raise money at any point, or did you ever seek external support?
Yes, we did. We did. And knowing the space is very important. Like knowing what you're doing and being known to know what you're doing. I think it's very important, regardless of what you're doing, because different opportunities just show up because you're there. And because you seem to be a credible, safe, knowledgeable pair of hands. When we started, we didn't actually start as a trustee. Okay. We had looked at the pension opportunity and we said, okay, the trustee space is the best place, but the law is requiring that trustees be licensed, and they will need to raise a certain minimum amount of capital. We don't know if we can do that. So if you take the trustee, you can split it up into an investment consultant and a fund administrator. Those are the two components of the trustee. We set up 2 different companies to do this, investment consultant and fund administrator. And then we showed up, the fund administration business got a mandate with the Christian Community Mutual Fund to do fund admin for them, so that was great. It was bringing about 300 cedis a month. An investment consultant, which is called Petra Advisors, was out there looking into this whole pension space and talking. And we started talking to the regulator, pensions regulator, and we realized that they needed a lot of help. So we give them a lot of advice, free pro bono, wrote white papers. A lot of the guidelines that were seen to me, we were involved in crafting. And the chairman began to trust us, the CEO began to trust us, and they'd send us things for us to look at and advise on and all this kind of stuff. So we started getting known. And one day, I remember this day, I was in the office of the CEO of the MPRA. He's like, guys, why aren't you doing the trustee thing now? I was like, well, we need to go and raise money, and we think we can win something. They're like, no. do it now. We're not seeing too many other people show an interest in this. Eventually, that analysis was wrong because there are 25 trustees. but at that time, not a lot of people were really seeing this opportunity as what we saw it for. They said, go ahead and do it. So I spoke to Chris and I'm like, okay, Charles, so we have to raise 1 million Ghana cedis at that time. So this comes together. We spoke to a private equity company. They said, we like this whole thing, it's great, like everywhere you are in the business, probably when if we give you this money, we'll take 80% of the company and you'll have 20. Thank you. We'll find a way, we'll hustle. If not private equity, why are friends and family? Eventual private equity partner said, yeah, it's always friends, families, and fools. The 3 Fs. But started calling our people. Guys in Ghana, guys in the US. Some brought 50, some brought 100, some brought 20. We have somebody who brought 8 in the US. But we're willing to, and the highest guy bought $400,000. So we raised about 1.1 million Ghana cedis at the time. It was about $750,000 total. And for that, we gave off 20% of the company and kept 80. And then when the second round came, those guys who had invested in us, the value tripled. When the private equity guys came, after we had started and had won some clients and had built a book, the value tripled. And we've sold an additional 25%. Well, we all got diluted 25%, so it wasn't the founders who sold it, but the original holders were all diluted down to 75%, and they brought in some money for 25%. We still haven't cashed out yet. So on paper we have money, but we have to be patient and wait for the exit. We raised the smallest amount of money we could in that first round. In this round as well, we also raised sort of fairly tight. We were very disciplined about how we spent money. I was just telling you, we printed our business cards. After we raised, we printed our business cards. Each one is like 15 pesos or something. I'm going to be giving out the business card. this guy. I better win your business, right? In comparison, we have competitors who blew through about 3 million Ghana cedis even before we had won our first client. We spent that million, and it was only at the end of last year that million. So 2 years, we bought in staff, we bought one car, the Petra petite mobile, and we drove it everywhere. People thought these guys have 6 cars. One car. We're in a space 3 times the size of it. We're still there. 50 of us. I just got kicked out of the boardroom. That's Chris, Helena, and I were in the boardroom. 7, 6, 8 people. We've been kicked out of our offices. So now we don't have a boardroom. We're sitting there. And there are new people coming. They're like, no, the 3 of you are utilizing space for 8 people. So you have to leave. You go back to the office. There'll be 3 seats there, but we can at least add another 5 to the 3. So we don't have a boardroom. It's mad. We're moving offices. At some point, we'll all have some space, but we had to make sure that, which was why I was struck, because we couldn't take salaries out of that million. We looked at it and we said, there's no way. So we've raised 2 rounds of money. The investors who came have an option to put in some additional money in 2 years. We're hoping that we don't have to take it. We're hoping that we don't need any additional financing. The next thing will be to do an IPO or sell to a larger institution. Yes?
Thank you so much for your presentation. At Petra, what do you do to keep your staff happy, at the same time focused? What do you do?
Philosophically, we believe in finding people quite young and training them. The guy who runs our fund operations is finished national service in August last year. So he's a year after national service. His number 2 is the same class. The person who runs our strategy and finance function is 1 year ahead of them. The person who runs our relationship management is 1 year ahead of her. The person who runs business development is about the same class as that guy. Those are the 2 most senior persons outside of the senior executives. The person who's been working the longest outside of the 3 of us is probably HR, who just hired, and IT, who just hired. So for those we brought in expertise. But in the core functions of Petra, we're training our own. And when they come in, they are right out of university. When we started, a lot of guys were coming from Ashesi University. We thought they had the right attitude for us because it's a can-do, think out of the box thing that they do there. And it was easy for us to identify them. But since then, we've been able to identify out of Legon and tech particularly, individuals who have that same kind of attitude. And so the numbers are shifting now. Last year, I think there were more people from Legon than Ashesi. And they come in and they don't know anything better than what we know, which is think through the thing, ask questions, work hard. If it doesn't make sense, challenge it. The fact that Kofi said it doesn't mean anything. The number of times I've heard Mr. Finn, you're wrong. Those who are polite enough to call me Mr. Finn, most of them call me Kofi or some other less polite name. It's very relaxed. It's very open. People are comfortable sharing their opinions. They know that if they do something and they are wrong, most of the time, the conversation will be had. It will not be a rude conversation. There's no shouting, there's no disrespect. We can speak about your work, but we won't speak about you as a person. People can do bad work all the time. We think about people who are in the company as being there for the long haul. Like I said, we want everybody to be an owner and to be there for a long time. When we hire, we're hiring because we think that is, we think from a partnership structure, right? Even though the company is not a partnership, so we expect to grow partners. So that's the attitude. If you don't carry your weight, you can't survive. We just let one guy go. He's been with us for a long time. We kept him there longer than we should have. And it was the wrong thing to do for him and for us. Why? Because of the way the whole environment is. The new national service people who just started 2 months ago would sit and snicker when he spoke. Because he was not at the level that he needed to be a part of the company. We had let that go on too long. He had lost the respect of his colleagues. He was harming the company in general, and his morale was low. And we had been thinking that, let's keep him because it was much better for us to do the separation, do it well, give him enough support to move on to the next thing and to find a place that fit him better. So that we will do. It's not because we're cowards, but it's because it works for both people. If you're sitting in the wrong place and you're not able to achieve the work, how do you feel? And you're talking to somebody junior and the person is looking at you like that, and you don't even talk because you don't know what you're talking about. It's painful. It was painful to watch. We have created that. It won't happen again. If there's a mismatch, we'll take care of it. We had moved him through 3 different departments. We should have been better at identifying maybe after the first one that it wasn't the departments that were the problem, but it was the fit. And there's something that he can go and find and do that he can do very well at, but it's not in the culture and the environment that we've built. We spend a lot of time looking for people. When we had our first person, if we're buying we interviewed we went through about 200 resumes, interviewed about 50 people before we settled on that. It's fallen a little bit because we're a little bit better at identifying what we want. And I think there's a lot of self-selection and stuff like that. But when we hire, we are hiring because we expect you to be there forever. It's not going to work like that. That's the expectation. Yes?
Yeah. I would like to take you a bit back. When you started, you said you were 2, but there's a 3rd person.
Helena.
Okay. The person was still working and...
yeah, she was working somewhere else.
Okay. and she didn't really know whether to join, to pick the job, to join you or not. And how did that end? Did she join you eventually or she didn't?
Yes,
She did.
she did. Yeah, so Helena worked with us. She quit her job. She had been in pensions in the US. She had come to Ghana. I was teaching. We were like, Charlie, this is just perfect. Why are you in Kumasi? I'm down here. Let's work. It took some convincing because she thought I was arrogant.
So in this case, the third partner who at that time was working eventually left her job
Yes.
to join you.
Yeah.
Now, once she was working, while she was doing this part-time,
Why wasn't she doing it part-time?
whilst she was doing your work part-time,
She wasn't doing her work part-time.
or so she stopped
She had to stop.
before.
Yeah. We were too lean to be able to afford any part-time person.
So would you say that in starting a business, it's advisable to get a partner who is willing to work full-time?
It depends on the specific circumstances. Okay. When we started, Chris was still working. So Chris Hammond's story is a little. We're both in Oceanic and we've been fired, right? Oceanic, when he was at Oceanic, we had seconded him to Aero Contractors, which is an airline owned by the same family. So immediately he got fired. He had been seconded already, so Aero Contractors made him full time. So during this whole planning stage and everything, he was working at Aero Contractors as the chief financial officer. And so we got to a point where we're like, okay, we're clear, we're going for it. It's time to raise the money and do it. Then he left Aero Contractors and joined. So during the planning stages, I mean, I didn't have a backup, but he had that backup. We still worked through everything together. I got to a point where we jumped in full time. So it depends on the amount of work and what people can put in. We had decided that we're going to be partners in this. We were all doing a lot of work on it. I was on it full time, so invariably I spent more time, but it didn't really change the dynamics. Once he was ready, we took off. So it depends on the specific circumstance, but know that it will take a lot of your time. If you want to get to the end quicker, you probably have to do it full time. It depends on what you have banked or what kind of support you have. If you're married and you have my wife was working, it helped a lot. So that can be the case. If you have parents, if you need to leave where the rented place you're in to go and live in the family house, don't be shy. Everybody makes fun of me because I live near Michelle Camp. Beyond Michelle Camp. Almost at Afina. That's what we could afford. Right? I don't know if it was the right trade-off because if you look at my car, completely broken down. But you had to make the sacrifice. If I had to, I'd go to my parents' home, save money, and get it done. That's part of why I say it's arrogance. Like this was going to work. We had burnt the bridges. There was no plan B. This was it. You don't always have to do it that way. You don't always have to do it that way. But for us, this was the way we did it. It was the only thing.
Kofi, was there any time, even though you knew this was going to work,
Yeah.
was there any time you felt, wait a minute, will this work?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. The self-doubt is a natural part of it. Self-doubt is a natural part of it. I find that people who tend to do this, like I said, either are very arrogant or they have a certain level of faith in things.
What were some of the things you would tap into at that time to keep going?
My faith. For me, it was that simple. I don't have to be Superman. So I think others would have different things to say, but for me, it was very, very simple. You've already asked how good.
Okay, so at the time you started, it was something new.
Yes.
Right? There weren't many trustees.
Yes. We were the first trustee to be
You
licensed.
were the first trustee. So you had other indirect competitors, like the insurance company.
We knew they were coming. We knew they'd be there. Enterprise had made a big push.
Okay. So my question has to do more with pricing.
Yes.
Because for us, we are having a problem with pricing at the moment because we don't really want to undercharge because it makes you look incompetent. And if you overcharge it's somewhere. So how did you come by your pricing strategy since you really have to put that internationally companies that you can compare price?
Remember, the licenses were given around April timeframe, and business actually started at the end of the year. So everybody was ready to go. There were days when, I remember one day, this day, I had 3 meetings at 10 o'clock. We were chasing any company, Petra Mobile, personal cars, taxi, all 15 people in the company had meetings. I had 3 meetings, 10 o'clock, we made all 3. Thank God for Ghanaians and their lateness. That's how we did it. People started late, 10 o'clock meetings. We got to them and they hadn't started. But we're scheduled. How are we going to do this? Right? So everybody was around, everybody was there. Our industry is regulated, and so there were maximum levels of pricing that you could have. But below that, there was free and open competition. One of our competitors just completely undercharged everybody. We didn't do that. We figured out what was fair and what was competitive, and we put it out there. And we lost some. So a company like GNPC, we lost on price. Okay? But for a lot of companies, they sort of didn't care. Our business is strange because it doesn't come out of your pocket, or at least you don't see it coming out of your pocket. So the issue of price is not as big. People sometimes care about it, but it's more of a theoretical conversation than a real hit your pockets kind of thing, right? You have to decide on what you are. Okay, you can either be the low-cost provider, or you can be the value add, completely customized, premium provider. Whatever it is that you do, you have to be very consistent. Okay? We call ourselves the experts. We try to position ourselves as knowing a lot more. So for example, we do white papers and research. The look and feel of our brand has to be very clean. Our staff have to be better educated about pensions than other people, and we spend a lot of time on that. Every Thursday we're doing training in the office. Every Thursday. Yesterday was leadership. We do Excel. Next week we're starting selling skills. We're doing the sales program for the month. Mostly the sales guys, but anybody else who's going to participate in it. We've decided that we're going to set ourselves as people who know what they're doing. What that means is that everything that we do has to be consistent with that. If you decide that you're going to price or position yourself as sort of, price competitive, then you need to think about what are the things that make it work for you, right? It means you're going to need volume. Okay? So if you're going to compete on price, you're going to need volume. How do you get volume? How do you scale? If you're going to be a premium provider, then your service has to be spectacular. There can't be anything missing, your service or product. Okay? And you will charge a premium for it and people will be happy. And in Ghana, you see both. You see both. In general, people who provide a premium product in Ghana do very well. They can't even service the market, and we charge high prices, but because we are so good, people want them. Okay? So you need to decide which one of them and be internally consistent with it.
To be a little personal now, I was going through about engineering.
Yes.
Now finance. How did you do that? What happened?
I never practiced as an engineer. I got a bachelor's and master's in engineering, and by the time I was done, I was a little burnt out. That's one. Two, the prospect of spending my life in wires and computer code was, and in the US, where I was fortunate enough to be educated, you can have some flexibility. You don't have to do. Yeah. However, the finance firm that I joined coming out of university was a very quantitative in its approach. So there were skills that I was bringing that could be applied. Okay, the person who hired me was a nuclear engineering PhD. There were people who had physics PhDs and stuff like that. So it was finance, but we spoke similar language. So it allowed me to ease into that world. And then after 3 years, I decided that I needed to learn how to speak and to be more social. And so I went to business school, a place where you were forced to speak, to round it off. But you can do anything, except that you have to spend the time learning that space. Now I'm learning about real estate. My wife has a textbook like this. She does, she's done a lot of real estate in the past. And every day I read like a page. I don't know but I'll get through it. But I have to learn that space because we think it's probably one of the most important asset classes in this country. If you think about the housing deficit, you think about the ability to hold value against depreciation and inflation. It's a very, very important asset, and we need to know it very, very well at Petra. So we'll do the work.
I have a question.
Yes.
You talk about this billion Ghana cedis that is sitting with the government.
Yes.
Okay. That's our money.
It's your money.
Okay. The question I have is the government, is it accruing interest?
Yes, it
Is
is.
it accruing interest?
Yes, it
That's
is.
comparable to the return. But if
Probably not. Probably less. It's being invested in treasury bills, but because of the inefficiency of how it's managed, you'll get some reduction in how much return you can get.
And we know when the money is going to be released.
We've been promised that 6 months.
the sliding window.
Yes.
Second question. Exits.
Yes.
You gave some hints.
Yes.
Now, starting out, did you plan to start a company, and did you have an exit? Did you start with an exit in mind?
Mm-hmm.
And what timeline did you guys set for yourself? Pick that exit.
No timeline. We're very flexible. The way we put it in the company is that it's not for my father. Petra is not for anybody's father. So you don't have to keep it in the family. If an opportunity presents itself and we think it's a compelling opportunity, we will sell it. We have no qualms about it. However, we also believe that we've been called to make sure that every Ghanaian has financial security. So if you put that call there, then it becomes much harder for us to completely exit the business because our mandate is to make sure that everybody has a pension. We don't exclude anybody in Ghana. So I suspect that we'll still be involved in it. But right opportunity presents itself and the situation is right, we don't have a problem taking the money, doing something else. Yes.
Between you and your partners, what keeps you together? Like going forward?
What keeps us together? I think there's an openness and there's certainly we don't take criticism personal. Okay, I had a fight with Helena 3 weeks ago, and we're in a conference room. We had a big fight, and it was about the work. It's about what we were doing. I didn't told her something. We moved in a certain direction. I hadn't consulted, and so we fought. We apologized and we made up. And that fight was never about us as people. It was about the work. We're very open. We share everything. Okay? And sometimes we negotiate a lot more than we should. There's certain situations where one needs to make a firm decision. I always have veto power because I have the managing director title. But we hardly ever use it. It's good that the three of us, votes tend to be 3-0 or 2-1. You can't have any other votes. We have a product coming out. I hate the name. But the votes won. and more important, when we shared it with the brother company, my name didn't go, But to me, they were making fun of me. But we have a lot of respect for each other. We challenge each other. We criticize. We poke. We push. But it's not about the person. There's a lot of respect. And I think that's very important. 2, you need to share value. You need to share value. Helena didn't start with us, but she's a shareholder now. We share. I can't say because I was the one who was full-time and you're part-time. We share. Because if we're able to do that, the 3 of us together are so much more powerful than any one of us individually. I mean, I could not have built this business without Chris Hammond. And Chris Hammond could not have built this business, I hope, without me. We complement each other. We have, I am sitting there having these crazy ideas, and Chris will bring it down, bring it home. How we do A, B, C. What are the steps? This is not practical. We have different skills and we complement each other. He's rigorous. He's I'm everywhere. I'm dreaming. Helena implements. So we work all together. And other people who come in will bring something different. But the respect. And the sharing. People always say it, but it's hard for you to do when they say it's better to have 10% of 100 than 0% of 10, right? You hear this stuff all the time. It's very hard to do. Because there are times when you're like, I did most of the work on this one. So stuff like that. But together, we're so much more powerful than anything else. And that understanding and the respect keeps it going. Yes?
All right. Looking at your current experience and your knowledge, if you're starting this company now, what would you have done to do?
Petra.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never thought of that. We have another business that we're starting. Maybe I can see how we're doing that differently. Helena is already in it, so she's getting a bigger share than she has of Petra. So she's there at the start. That's one thing that's different. It's still in a sweet spot. It's still in finance. And it comes out of the learnings that we've gotten out of Petra and the value of Petra as an asset. One of the secret weapons. Can I share an anecdote? And then I'll talk about it. In Nigeria, at that bank that we worked, they had an opportunity to fix things before the thing blew up. And that opportunity would have required the managing director of that company leaving. She should have left a lot earlier and that company could have been cleaned up before it blew up. She would have still been very, very wealthy, but she was group managing director. There is something about group managing director that money cannot buy, right? And leaving that title was something she couldn't deal with. And so that cost her to stay. So we have to try to basically make sure that does not happen here in general. Petra provides a little bit of that group managing director thing. Why? We control the asset. If I start something else in finance, I have a buyer as Petra that can buy the different things that we can build in finance. Okay. And then 2, because we're Petra, we can see what's missing. There's so much missing. So many things that don't work. We don't complain. We start businesses. Okay? So we're starting a business that's going to fix one of the biggest problems that we have as Petra. And we know that Petra is there as a client, right? So that's one of the values of Petra. Outside of it being a trustee or all the kind of stuff, it controls the asset. It's a dedicated buyer. Okay? And so even that, when it comes to selling, it's one of the things that will be difficult because it's there. In 5 years' time, we should be about 1 billion CDs. Walking around Ghana with 1 billion CDs. Charlie? It's not a personal money, but controlling 1 billion CDs. If I left that company, some doors will open. If I'm at Petra and I control, doors will open. So Petra it's a very special, but we're starting this other business with more equal share for the three partners. We've spent a lot less time arguing with our investors about valuation. We still brought in investors even though we could have funded it ourselves. We like the discipline of having external people who hold you accountable. Okay, so we brought in. We didn't spend a lot of time fighting over valuation. We told them we think this is the price. Bring your money and tell us what return you want. We'll all agree on a return. If we beat that return, then the price was right. If we don't beat it, we'll earn more of the company because it means the price was wrong. Because what we found in the first experience was that any calculation that we did, any fault, it didn't matter. It was wrong. Right? So don't let's spend too much time about an unknown future. Let's talk about what matters to both of us. We want your money, you want a return. You could take this money and put it in this other asset and it will give you 15% in dollars. So, okay, fine. You have 15% in dollars at some valuation that we've created. We said it's $1 million. The company is worth $1 million. We're raising 100,000. Bring your money, and we brought the money. We didn't argue, but at 15%, if we do better than 15%, then the price was cheap. If we do worse, then the valuation was not $1 million. It was 750,000. So 100,000 is not 10%. It's more. Okay, so that's the second thing that we've done. Third thing, which would be different, is that we'll have to find other people to manage it. We won't be involved in that business as well. And two reasons why. By the time we're done, we should have created 100,000 jobs. Us, whoever us is today, three of us, but whoever else is joining this partnership that we have. We should have created 100,000 jobs. Today we've created 50. Okay. So this other one is in financial services. So we'll probably create another 50 or something like that. And then we have to find a way to build businesses that can stand on their own. So that will be the next step. But we will be working less and less in the businesses that we create, and a lot of it will be because of the success of the first one. So that's something that will be different in what we do next. Apart from that, the things will be the same. We identify the what, the who, people who have expertise, and then you do the work. You make sure that you have the structures and everything else in place that will ensure success. You make it less about you. Those things will always be the same. Petra Trust is not for Mr. Kudufin, who's my father. So I don't need to be there forever. And I don't need to leave it to my children. Right? It would be better if I can leave them a lot of money. I don't need to leave them Petra. I can leave them any asset. Right? So we're not married to it.
So this new company, did you go back to the investor that you...
Some of the same guys. And because we're giving them 3x already,
the track record, right?
it was much easier for them to just, okay, no argument. This was so much easier than the first time. We've said no to so many people on the second one because the risk is less too. Because Petra exists, the risk is so much less. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have...
I hope you're filming because